All right. Now, we're ready to cover the urinary system. Before we start, I want to say this is the easiest system in your body. Okay? What is the purpose of the urinary system? Eliminate waste in the form of what? Urine. Okay? So, where's that waste coming from? Where are you getting the waste from to make your urine? That's the part no one ever really has, right? But it's very simple. What your kidneys do, all of the blood in your body flows through your kidneys. Your kidneys look at everything in your blood, and they look at everything in your blood, and they say, okay, this is the good stuff in your blood, put it in the blood. This is the bad stuff, you're going into the rest of the part of the kidney, and I'm going to turn you into urine. That's very simple, right? Now, that being said, for some reason, the urinary system is something that most people have a harder time with the first time they hear it. So we're going to say it over and over and over again. One of my really good friends just graduated from nursing school last spring, and he called me after he had his urinary exam in nursing school, and he said, you know, I don't know why I thought urinary system was so complicated. You're right, that really is the easiest system in the body. So I'm going to try to go really slow, point the stuff out that confuses people, and try not to let it confuse you. I want you to just keep in mind in the back of your brain the whole time we're going through this, all we are doing is looking at the blood, putting the good stuff from the blood back in the blood. We want to keep that. The stuff we do not need, we're going to let filter on out through the kidneys, and we're going to urinate it out of our body. Okay. What's the number one waste product that we put in our urine? What's it made of? Water. Water. Okay, most people don't think of it because you're like, water's not waste. I need waste. I need water. You do need water, but you don't need all of the water in your body. So the number one thing your kidneys have to do is regulate the amount of fluid you keep in your body. Get rid of excess water. You guys, your answers you guys were all saying were correct too. Ammonia waste, urea, things like that are your major components that come out in your urine other than the water. Okay? All right. So when we start with the urinary system, today we are going to cover pretty much just anatomy. And it's going to be your job to go home, learn the anatomy. Since we're not having lab this week, you've got to force yourself to learn the terminology. Okay? The terminology will kill you if you do not sit down and learn it. Okay? Number one piece of terminology is the word renal. Anytime you see renal, that refers to the kidney. Okay? The primary organ of the urinary system is your kidney. You have two. You have a right kidney and a left kidney. Right kidney is a little lower than the left kidney, but they are pretty much the same size. Okay? You do not need them both. One can do what your body needs, but it's better to have both of them. Yeah, one sits lower than the other just because of where the other organs are. What giant organ sits more on the right side of your body right here? Liver. Remember how big the liver was and how it came and shot down to the right because your stomach was on the left? So it mainly sits a little lower just because you got so much liver poking out on that right side. Okay? The two kidneys are the primary organ because they are the ones responsible for making the urine. Okay? That's the only place we have to talk about physiology. That's the only place that any real stuff happens with the urinary system. After you make the urine in your two kidneys, it just goes through a series of pipes, a little reservoir, and then we pee it out. We urinate it out. Okay? To get from the kidneys out of the body, the urine goes through a ureter. Okay? These are the long ureters. They're just tubes that transport the urine from the kidneys to the bladder. Nothing happens to the urine in the ureters. In the bladder, the urine stays there until it collects a large enough amount that we get the sensation that we need to go to the bathroom. But again, nothing happens to the urine while it's in the bladder. From the bladder, we excrete the urine out of our body through the urethra. Okay? Now this is a female picture right here. how would the male picture look different? Well, he would have a penis, but that's the reproductive system. No, men don't really have much bigger bladder. That's just something we like to say because women like to go to the bathroom a lot. They don't really have that much. It is, all their organs are a little bigger, but not really much. Women just like to pee a lot. They have a prostate, but just with the organs we just went over, how's a man going to be different? They couldn't answer yesterday either. We got a lot to do in the reproductive system. The urethra of a man is longer. Well, that's exaggerating, sorry. The urethra of a man is longer than the urethra of a woman. That's really the only difference. But since nothing's happening as the urine goes through the urethra as far as the urinary system is concerned, we're just going to assume men and women are the same. Okay? All right. Well, we got a lot to do. All right. See if you can recognize some other stuff in this picture. What's this giant artery running down the center of the body? It's the aorta, the abdominal aorta. The aorta comes directly off the heart, right? All of the blood that pumps through your heart comes out the aorta, right? Branches with the subclavians, brachiocephalic, all that good stuff. But the big portion of the aorta comes down and goes through the center of the body, right? Where did I tell you we were going to get the stuff to make the urine from? Blood. So we got to have a lot of blood going into the kidneys, right? The biggest branch off of the aorta branches left and right, and these are called the renal arteries. That's where all the blood, so the blood comes out of the heart and then goes directly through the kidneys, through that renal artery. We clean it out, get all the waste out of it, and then the good blood comes flowing back out of the kidney through a big renal vein and goes into that large vein running down the center of your body. Which one's that? Not superior, close. Inferior vena cava. Good. Okay? So should be able to recognize that. Also, what these adrenal glands on top of the kidneys, we've already talked about those. What are those for? To secrete your adrenaline. They also secreted some of the hormones we talked about, glucocorticoids, mineralocorticoids like aldosterone. Y'all remember that from the very first day of class? If you don't worry, we're going to go back over aldosterone now that we're talking about kidneys. Okay? All right? So we got a good overall picture. We understand generic what's happening, right? We're going to take our blood, filter it through the kidneys, get the bad stuff out, turn it into urine. Then once you get that urine out, we're going to let it flow through the ureter, into the bladder, out the urethra, right? Okay. Now, I know we've already gone over some of this, but just to go through all the slides. So our main function of our kidney is going to be to remove the waste products from our body and to regulate our blood volume, meaning get rid of the extra water. So those are your two big key things you need to keep up with, you need to remember. The last three functions of the kidney, we're not really going to mess with too much in this class, but it's not bad for you to know that this does happen in the kidneys. Our kidneys are one of the only places in our body we can do something called gluconeogenesis. That sounds horrible, but I bet you can figure out what it means. What does genesis mean? Beginning, creation, right? Gluco means what? Sugar. So gluconeogenesis is the beginning or the creation of a sugar. Your kidneys have the ability to make a sugar. So if it's been a long time since you've eaten, there's one organ in your body that can only live off of sugar. That's your brain, right? So if it's been a really long time since you've eaten, your kidneys will actually make some sugar to go to your brain to help your brain survive until you can actually eat something. You can't live for a very long time off of that sugar, but it just keeps your brain functioning properly. Okay? Activation of vitamin D happens in your kidneys. Where do we make vitamin D at? In our skin. The sun causes us to create vitamin D underneath our skin. That vitamin D can't be used until it goes into the blood, travels to the kidney, and then inside of the kidney we change it a little, which is what activate means. Then we put it back in our blood, we can send it to our bones, combine it with our calcium, and we can actually use the vitamin D in our body. Okay? The endocrine functions of the kidneys, we're going to talk about a little bit. We will talk about renin. Renin is a hormone made by your kidneys to help regulate your blood pressure. Okay? What does blood pressure have to do with what we're talking about? How's blood pressure related to urine? Okay. So if your blood has high pressure, that means it's going to go through your kidneys faster. That's going to have a big effect on your ability to get the correct amount of waste out. And if that doesn't quite click and make sense, it will as we go through it. You're going to see how your kidneys not only have the ability to look at your blood and pick out the waste, your kidneys can also check and say, oh, wait, blood pressure's a little too high. Let's take a little extra water out. Let's make her pee a little more. Oh, blood pressure's too low. We don't need to pee. We need to leave that water in the blood. Okay? Kidneys are pretty smart organs. Okay? All right. Now we're ready to look at the actual kidney. So I told you the right kidney's a little lower than the left kidney. How many of you saw the kidneys when we dissected pigs in lab? Just a few of you did, right? The reason the rest of you didn't see them is because they weren't just hanging out there like the intestines and the stomach and everything was. The kidneys were completely covered in fat and stuck to the dorsal, the back wall of your pigs. So you actually would have had to cut that fat. And we're going to do this next week. We'll get our pigs back out. But you actually have to cut the fat and dig your kidneys out. Why do you think we wrap the kidneys in so much fat? To protect them. Okay? All your other organs weren't wrapped in fat, right? Your heart's not wrapped in fat. Your lungs aren't. What protects them? Bones, right? Your kidneys are down this low in your lower back. There's no bone to protect them. So you have to have a nice cushion. Otherwise, if somebody accidentally hit you in your back, it would mess up one of your kidneys. That's why when you, like boxing and different sports, they've had to limit the amount of times and the ways people could hit in the kidneys because they're just not protected quite as well. Okay? So this is just definition. I'm going to show you the picture. We're going to start with the cheesy drawing and then look at the real kidney because the real kidney is kind of mushy, and we're going to dissect big kidneys in lab next week too. So you're going to get to see one of these. We're going to dissect pig kidneys, and pigs pee a lot. They have gigantic kidneys, okay? The kidney has a nice fibrous capsule on the outside. The fibrous capsule is tough. You're going to have to really stab it with a scalpel and cut. But once you get on the inside of the kidney, very, very mushy. Not much to the texture. Okay, so fibrous capsule just helps form the shape. Okay, the kidneys always have this concave side and convex side, meaning they look like a kidney bean. That's why we call them kidney beans, because they're shaped like kidneys. So you have one nice big rounded side, and then a little pooched in area. A little pooched in area is the true scientific term for that. So this little pooched in area right here, that is where the ureter comes out. And that's also where the renal artery and renal vein go in. This whole area right here is called the renal pelvis. Okay? Renal pelvis. Whole area where all this stuff's going in. Okay? All right? The kidney, when you do a dissection, when you do a cross-section of it, you can clearly see the difference between the cortex and the medulla. What do those two words mean? Cortex means outside, medulla means middle of the organ inside, right? The cortex is from about right here to right here. So all of this area that my mouse is going over right now, that's the cortex, okay? There's not much in the cortex but veins and arteries. The medulla, you know you've hit the medulla when you start seeing these little, the textbook calls them triangle shaped. I think they look like fish scales or like a fish fin on the back of a fish, all right? That's how you know you've hit the medulla. You start seeing these guys. These little triangle shapes are called the renal pyramids. It's important to know their name because we're going to start talking next class period about how we make urine. Urine is made right here at the boundary between the cortex and the medulla. At the very top of one of those pyramids, that's where the nephrons are. And we're going to go over the nephrons. That's the area where we make urine. That's where we make urine. Okay? Once we make our urine, the urine starts draining and has to go through some little collection ducts, because ultimately where do we need our urine to go? To this ureter, right? We got to get it to go to the ureter so it can go to the bladder. The little collection ducts have names. So the urine will drain out the pyramid, go into this structure right here. That's called a minor calyx. And this is the word calyx. Do I need to change colors? Can y'all not see what I'm writing? Here, let's try red. All right, better? Well, I just have to look real close. All right, that's a minor calyx, so urine's going to go there. Okay? From the minor calyx, it keeps traveling out because we're trying to get it to the ureter. It goes to a major calyx. A major calyx is where two minor calyces hook together. Okay? Just getting bigger and bigger with our little piping system. From the major calyx, we'll drain into the pelvis. Remember, the pelvis is just the name of the big area in the center, right? From the pelvis, we drain out the ureter, and then after the ureter, we go to the bladder, then out the urethra. Okay, so just once we start draining all through here, it's already urine. All right, the only place where we make urine is right there at that boundary of the cortex and the medulla. After you leave there, it's already urine. We're not doing anything to it. We're just sending it on out. Okay? So really the only physiology we have to talk about is what's happening in this one little microscopic area right here. Okay? But I don't think I said it yesterday, so let me make sure I say it today. Is that the only place in this kidney we're going to make urine? No, right? Here and here, at the boundary of all of these, you're going to be making urine. Okay? The little structure that's found there is called a nephron. We're going to look at that in a second. You have billions of nephrons in each kidney. So just because I drew it in one place doesn't mean that's the only place you're making it. Just trying to show you the pathway that it would flow. Okay? A couple other structures you need to know. Whenever this little fleshy area from the cortex dips down between two pyramids, this is a column, just simply because it looks like columns dipping down. Okay, so this is a column. That's a column. Every now and then, and you'll see this when we do our dissections in lab, if you grab a pyramid, you can kind of lift it up a little bit, and you'll see a big hole, a gap in the kidney. That's called a medullary sinus. And that should make sense, because what does sinus mean in A&PII? A hole. Now, the sinus in your bone is a air-filled hole in the bone. Okay, so those are going to be your medullary sinuses. Sometimes you'll see chunks of fat down in those sinuses, and that's again just to give it some nice plumpness. You don't want your kidney to be too skinny. You want it to have a little fat in there. Okay. All right. Now that's a little easier when we're looking at the cheesy drawing. When we try to translate that into a real kidney, sometimes it's a little more difficult. But can you see the difference between the cortex and the medulla? To me, the easiest way is the cortex has a lighter color to it. And it does have a different color. And when you see it in person, it's much easier to see. Okay? Now, the kidneys we will look at in lab have been dye infused. That means they took some pink dye and they squirted it into all the arteries. Then they took some blue dye and squirted it into all the veins and then preserved it. So that's why things look pink and blue. Okay? So what you'll see in the cortex of your real kidney is just a bunch of pink and blue because it's so many blood vessels inside of it. Okay? Can you see a pyramid? There's one. There's one. Here's another down here. Of course, they're not as perfectly triangular because this is a real kidney. All right? Yeah, and it's been dead a while, right, and preserved. All right. Can you see how this looks just like a little set of canals, like a little set of channels? These are the calyces. This one right here is coming right off of a pyramid. So, right here. Okay? So that's going to be a minor calyx. Then down here it gets bigger. That's a major calyx. Okay? And as we come down over here, this area is what? Pelvis. And then a little tube coming out right here is ureter. So if we were going to trace the path of urine production here, we could say, well, if we make an urine here, it's going to travel down the pyramid, down a minor calyx, into a major calyx, into the pelvis, out the ureter. Got it? The pelvis is the centralized junction of all of the rest of the little canals, the little piping system. Okay. Sometimes you'll also hear the word hilum. Hilum just refers to, not imaginary, but if you weren't really touching the kidney, but you were just kind of pointing at it, if you pointed to this side of the kidney, they'd say that's the hilum. Okay? But if I'm actually touching this right here, I'm touching the pelvis. So don't let that confuse you. Just like when they point to the bottom of the heart and said that's the apex, well, they're just pointing at the bottom and saying that's the apex. If I point to this part, we'll say that's the hilum. But if I actually have cut it open and I'm touching this channel system, then I'm actually touching the renal pelvis. Does that make sense? Okay? Yeah, if it's closed and you're just saying this generic region, it's the hilum. If you've cut it open and you're following the urine and you're saying I'm touching this part, then it's the pelvis. Okay? All right, so that's our kidney. Now that's the simplified version of the kidney, because we really didn't have any blood vessels we were looking at. But it turns out your kidneys have to do a lot. And I'm not big on you memorizing numbers, but just to give you an idea, every single minute in your lifetime, each of your kidneys have 1,200 mL of blood put into that kidney. That's about 1/4 of your total blood volume. So let's do some simple math. Every 4 minutes, every bit of your blood in your body filters through your kidney. That's impressive, right? Your blood is flowing pretty darn fast, and your kidneys have to work really fast to take care of that much blood. Okay? Now, this is the drawing if we put the blood vessels on there. Now you see why I left them out at first, right? And the answer is yes. You need to know the pathway of blood flow. So that's your homework assignment number 1. Go ahead, sit down, memorize the path of blood flow. It's not as bad as it looks because it goes in one way and then it's just the reverse back out. Okay? So let's follow it. The aorta is the big blood vessel that would run down the center, right? Then this renal artery comes into the pelvis area, right? Okay. Renal artery comes in, starts branching. Remember back to when we were talking about blood. We said arteries are big, right? Then they start branching and get smaller and smaller, right? Ultimately, we need our blood vessels to get small enough that they can let stuff out, right? Because we want to get the bad stuff out of the blood. So how small do they have to get to where they get small enough that stuff can leak out of the blood vessel? They have to become a capillary. So we got to branch them and get skinnier and skinnier each time we branch them. Okay? Your renal artery is as big around as like your pointer finger. That's a whole lot bigger than a capillary. So we got to branch it and let it get smaller several times. Okay? The first time the renal artery branches, it becomes a segmental artery. After the segmental artery starts branching, it becomes an interlobar artery. When you do your dissections in lab, you'll be able to see these. The interlobar is the one running up the columns between two pyramids. That you'll see a long blood vessel running in between there. That's interlobar. The way I always remembered that was it looks like it's going between two of the important lobes of the kidney. Okay? The interlobar branches, becomes arcuate, and it kind of arcs out. See how it's arcing over the pyramid? Okay. Then the arcuate artery branches again, and that's what these little bitty tiny ones are out here in the cortex. Your textbook calls them cortical radiate artery, which makes sense. Cortical means in the cortex. Radiate because they're just radiating out everywhere. Your lab manual, which is the same author, but your lab manual calls these interlobular. Okay, you see the difference between this word and this word? Okay, interlobar and interlobular. It has a U in it. Everybody sees the difference. I didn't write the same word again. Okay, interlobular is the same thing as cortical radiate artery. These two things are exactly the same. Okay, that's an equal. Same exact thing. Okay. The interlobular, these little bitty now, teeny tiny little arterioles, become an afferent arteriole, and afferent means before, right? Efferent means after. The afferent arteriole is a really, really tiny little piece that turns into the glomerulus. Okay? See how the word's starting to get bad, right? The glomerulus is a capillary bed. Okay? So this is going to be the point where we actually start to filter out, and this is bad, A&P teacher, but filter out the bad stuff from the blood. Okay? That's the point. Why do we not just call it a capillary? Because we have already learned that a capillary is the point where we can filter stuff out. Because there's two important capillaries we're going to talk about. So in the urinary system, we have to name the capillary beds and give them very specific names. Okay, this is the first capillary bed. It's called the glomerulus. Okay. After the glomerulus, we have the efferent arteriole. Why? Because if afferent goes into something, efferent comes out, right? After the efferent arteriole, we have the second set of capillaries that are important, and these are called the peritubular capillaries and the vasa recta. Okay? These capillary beds are going to be responsible for, let's put double checking. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Kind of simplified it at first, and I said the bad stuff is taken out and the good stuff's kept in. If every 4 minutes your kidneys are filtering every bit of your blood, do you think it's possible that the very first time they look at it, they can get exactly just the bad stuff out and put all the good stuff back in? It's not possible for it to happen that fast. So the glomerulus kind of lets too much out, and then these peritubular capillaries, the vasa recta, they're kind of watching that. Oh, wait, no, that's good. And then they'll pull it back into the blood. Wait, that slipped through. This is good. Let me pull it back into the blood. So that's what I mean by double checking. These capillaries are responsible for making sure none of the good stuff really did get put in the urine and none of the bad stuff didn't get put back in the blood. Mm-hmm. Dialysis, most people don't think of dialysis being as serious as it is. But if your kidney stops working, you are no longer able to get rid of water waste or get rid of any waste product in your blood. How do you think you would feel if you had a bunch of waste in your blood? Pretty crappy. So people between their dialysis meetings is not the right word, treatments, they're going to feel bad. And of course I don't know firsthand, but I would suspect that someone on dialysis feels horrible. The only way you would feel okay is if you were hooked up to the dialysis machine all the time. But no one wants to be hooked up to a dialysis machine all the time. Now, there are points when people get so sick they have to be. But that's why only reason they put 2 days in between is just to try to improve your quality of life where you're not hooked up to a machine all the time. But they would feel bad. Okay? So we kind of starting to understand this, right? We're going to be looking in more detail at what the glomerulus and the vasa recta and everything does, but you're keeping up with the overall goal, right? We're trying to take the bad stuff out of the blood and keep the good stuff in the blood, but can't all happen at one place. Now the rest of it is just the reverse. These peritubular capillaries start hooking together and getting bigger. Now they're called veins because they're heading back out, right? They're heading back to the heart, okay? We have a cortical radiate vein. What would be the other word for that vein? interlobular vein. So those are going to be these little blue ones out here, right? Then we have an arcuate vein, arches or arcs over, right? Then interlobar vein, okay? The only thing we do is we skip segmental. They get bigger faster. Becomes renal vein, hits the inferior vena cava, goes back to the heart. Why does the blood go back to the heart? Just to get another pump, right? Build up pressure again. This is now the good, clean blood. We want it to go other places, okay? All right, so we understand. We got to learn this, right? Okay? Now let's look at the anatomy of a nephron, okay? The nephron is the smallest functional unit of the kidney. This is the place where we actually make our urine. Okay? We make it, and then we drain it out, the minor calyx, major calyx, pelvis, all that. We got to have the nephron to make it. Okay? The nephron has a couple parts that are really important. There's going to be the area where you're interacting with the glomerulus. What was the glomerulus? Capillary bed, the blood vessels, right? So if I'm trying to make the urine, there's got to be part of the nephron that wraps around that glomerulus, right? Because I need to catch the blood that's coming out of it, okay? That part is called Bowman's capsule, and I'm going to show you a picture in just a second, okay? After that, we have the renal tubules, okay? So every time you hear the word tubule, that should make you think, okay, we're talking about part of the nephron. That's where the filtrate in the urine is flowing through. That's where we're making our urine, okay? Flip to a picture. This is what a nephron looks like, okay? Again, in case you forgot, we're looking at this little area right here, the boundary between the cortex and the medulla inside of one of those little medullary pyramids. Okay, you're going to have millions, billions of these in the kidney. Okay? All right, so here comes the blood flowing in. We've gotten really, really tiny. This is microscopic. This would be an interlobular artery, okay, or cortical radiate artery, whatever you want to call it. Becomes an afferent arteriole. This inside of this yellowy looking thing, that is the glomerulus. That's the capillary bed. Then the good blood flows back out the efferent arteriole and keeps going. Okay? This orangey yellow looking thing wrapped around the glomerulus is called Bowman's capsule. Together, that structure is called the renal corpuscle. Okay? So sometimes you'll see that. Okay? The glomerulus and Bowman's capsule. This whole little thing right here. Okay. What's the big what now? Right here? We're getting there. We're getting there. Okay? So, the nephron is the whole little yellow looking thing. Brown. It looks brown up there. It looks yellow on the screen. Okay? So, let's say we've just taken the stuff out of the blood. We've pulled the stuff out of the glomerulus. Is it urine yet? Not quite, because we got to double check it and get it just right. At this point, we call it filtrate, because we're still filtering it out. Okay? So the filtrate flows through the first part of the nephron. This first little twisted up part is called the proximal convoluted tubule, the PCT. Does that make sense? What does proximal mean? Close to the origin. Convoluted means all twisted up, okay? So this part is closest to the beginning of the nephron, so it's the proximal convoluted tubule. Then we have a big loopy thing. The whole thing is the loop of Henle. The filtrate goes down first, the descending limb of the loop of Henle. Then we have the loop. Then we come up the ascending limb of the loop of Henle. Then we have another little twisty area that's further from the beginning. So this is the distal convoluted tubule. Okay? Then it keeps going. This is the collecting duct. The reason it has these little branches is because there'd be another nephron over here on this side, right? And it would be making filtrate and urine and dumping into the same collecting duct. Guess what the collecting duct joins up to? A calyx or calyx, right? So this would continue and go to the minor calyx, right? Then the minor calyx would join another one and become a major calyx. So do you see how this all fits together? This This nephron is just a set of tubes that hooks up to the bigger set of tubes that we can see with the naked eye for our urine to flow through. Okay? Some of you went, oh, so hopefully the light bulb went off for a couple of you that's starting to make sense. Okay? Once it gets into the collecting duct and the minor calyx, that's when we're going to start calling it urine. We're done with it. All of the process of making it from filtrate into urine is going to happen inside of this nephron. It would connect to a different nephron. It's exactly, this would travel out, and this would be the distal convoluted tubule of another nephron, and they all just come together. Because the overall goal is we're trying to make this like a big sewage system, like a big plumbing system. We're just trying to hook all the pipes together. Okay? Now, we have to have that other capillary interacting with this, right? So we said the glomerulus is just the first one, where we're going to dump some stuff out of the blood. It turns out what we actually do, we dump everything out of our blood, good or bad, that is small enough to fit through some holes. These holes are small enough that pretty much everything besides a red blood cell and a protein comes through. We dump the good and the bad. And then we let our nephron look at it and say, wait, this is good, put it back. Whoop, this is bad, let it keep going. We need that other set of capillaries to interact. This is a very simplified picture of what a nephron really looks like. Okay? After we had the efferent arteriole, we went again, right? And we had the paratubular capillaries. Remember that? What these paratubular capillaries do is come wrap all around here. Okay? So again, what we're going to do, we're going to dump everything out of the glomerulus, out of the blood, put it in these tubes. And as all the stuff is floating through the tubes, if it's good, we can stick it back in that paratubular capillary because it's right there. So we just put the good stuff back in. If it's something bad, if it's a waste product, we let it stay in the tubes and let it keep going so it can go out and form into our urine. Okay? We're still going to talk about what the driving forces of physiology. I just keep saying the kidney says it's good and puts it back. We're going to talk about how the kidney knows what's good and what's bad. But for now, I'm just trying to get you to understand the path of how this is going. Yeah, right. Right. So go back to here. Let's make the connection between the gross and the microanatomy. Okay. These are the interlobular arteries, and then you can't see the other ones here because they get so small. It goes from interlobular artery to afferent arteriole to glomerulus to efferent arteriole to paratubular capillaries. So what we've done is we've just gone from right here where you can't see, and now we're seeing this. So this would be a bigger artery, branches and becomes a smaller artery, becomes afferent arteriole, glomerulus, efferent, and then the blood vessels just continue. We don't ever cut our blood vessels, right? Blood is a continuous system. So paratubular capillaries just continue and wrap on around. Did that on I'm sorry. No. Where it's putting it back in the blood is all through here. The entire process along the tubes. Oh, we're going to get there. We're going to get there. You're asking me, like, basically, what you're asking me is what is going to allow it to go from that tube back into the blood, right? And that's going to be, we're going to talk about there's some diffusion, some active transport. We're going to talk about how those tubes are thin enough that certain things can go through them. And the tube is right here. The capillary is pushed right up next to it, so they can just exchange stuff. Yes. Okay? All right, let me show you this picture. And there's a reason I haven't showed it to you yet, and we're going to come back and go over this stuff, but this is what nephrons look more like. But if I had showed you that picture first, you'd all just say, well, I give up, right? So that's why I didn't really show you that at first, okay? We're trying to build up to what it really looks like, okay? All right. So a little closer view of what the glomerulus looks like with that Bowman's capsule wrapped around it. Okay? What it actually looks like is this red thing right here. That's the wall of the glomerulus. It's a capillary, so it's got little holes in it, right? See that little hole? Those are supposed to represent the gaps, the holes in the blood vessel. So stuff can actually leak through that hole out of the blood. Okay? So anything that is small enough to go through that hole can leave the blood and go into Bowman's capsule. And then your kidney can look at it and decide what's good and what's not good. Okay? The cell, this strange looking thing looks like the side of a science fiction movie, that is one cell of Bowman's capsule. Okay? Bowman's capsule is modified to have podocytes. That's just a way of saying fake feet. It just has extensions of the cell wrap around and grab. And so let's think about why. If I was dripping water out and trying to drop it into a little cup, the bigger the cup, the easier it is for me to get the water to flow into the cup, right? So all we're doing here is the cells of Bowman's capsule just stick feet out and grab to make a big gap so that all the stuff coming from the blood can drain into the tubes. Would it be bad if some of that missed Bowman's capsule and leaked out into your kidney? Yeah, because then you'd have blood leaking out into your body. That would never be a good thing. All right, I think this next picture is a little bit better, and I'll come back to those words. Okay, so this is showing you the gap. So anything small enough as it flows through here is leaving the blood and it's going into Bowman's capsule. Okay, so it's showing you it's just got little feet sticking out, making nice little passageways saying, I want all of you to come into me so you can be checked and I can turn you into urine. Okay? This process is called filtration. And we're going to go over 3 physiological processes in the urinary system. The first one is filtration. It only happens at the glomerulus. Okay? So you guys can read the words later. Let's go back to the picture. What is going to make things come out of this blood? Is the blood that's flowing through here just kind of lollygagging and just kind of coming through at its own pace? Remember, got pressure, right? Remember we talked back in blood vessels, talked about if I have a water hose and I squeeze that water hose and make the diameter of the hose smaller, does the water come out faster? What happens when you put your finger over the end of a water hose? Squirts out very forceful, right? So we have taken this big volume of blood and we're squeezing it through this little bitty tiny capillary. So as the blood's coming through here, it is cooking. It is full of pressure. So you've got these holes. Anything that'll fit through that hole, it's just going to go. Right? Everything except your red blood cells. Now your red blood cells, they're too big. So when they come through here, they can't fit through. Okay? A lot of your proteins are also too big. Pretty much anything besides a red blood cell and a protein, it can go through. Would it be bad if you had blood, red blood cells in your urine? What does that mean? It means that red blood cells are leaking through the glomerulus. Can you think of something really simple that would make that happen? What? Okay, those are the more complex ones. Let's do the easy ones first. Y'all gave me good answers, but those are the more complicated ones. Let's say I have high blood pressure. Is that going to make stuff come through here faster? If I've already got high blood pressure and I make it smaller, that blood is just coming through here, and these red blood cells are getting pushed against these holes, and they're like, you know, being pushed, right? If it's pushed hard enough, that red blood cell can squeeze through that hole. That's one of the common signs of high blood pressure. It's blood in your urine because you're forcing it through. Would low blood pressure be bad? It's going to be bad for this process too because there's not enough pressure to force all the waste out. Right? So this is just one simple reason we need to have our blood pressure correct. Now in lab, we're all going to check our own urine. And you can go, oh my God, yes, you're going to pee in a cup. I'm sorry, I don't think that's gross. You've all done it before, okay? You're going to pee in the cup in the bathroom, and you're going to check your own urine. And then we're going to talk about things like how diabetes, urinary tract infections, things like that can affect your urine. Okay, we're not doing pregnancy tests. And we're going to check it for sugar, blood, different things like that. Yeah, we're just using strips. Okay. No, we're not testing for drugs. I don't want to know if you have drugs in your urine. I don't want to know if you have a baby in your belly. We're not testing for any of that stuff. All right? Now, we're still doing anatomy. I know y'all like, oh my God, it's a lot of anatomy. It's different terminology. We're still doing anatomy. Okay? So we're going to look a little closer at the rest of that tubule. The proximal convoluted tubule, loop of Henle, distal collecting duct. Okay, convoluted tubule, excuse me. All right, first one, PCT. It is made of simple cuboidal epithelium with microvilli. All right, y'all should already be able to tell me what's going on there. What is a cuboidal cell responsible for? Simple diffusion? No, that's simple squamous, right? No, that's columnar or stratified. Absorption and secretion. Think back to A&PII, right? Absorption and secretion. So let's go back to the picture real quick. Yeah, don't flip. Just watch with me. Okay? So all the stuff came out of the blood, right? And all that stuff's going through this proximal convoluted tubule. We need to put some of it back where? Back in the blood, right? We got to put the good stuff back in the blood. So we need those cuboidal cells to allow secretion to put it back in the blood. What if we miss something in the blood? Do we need to get it out of the blood? Yep, we want to put it in the tubules. Okay? So I've already given you the two words, but now I'm going to really point them out to you. The other two big pieces of terminology that you need to be familiar with, the other two big physiological processes in addition to filtration are reabsorption and secretion. Okay, so I'm going to write it down for you. Okay, so we talked about filtration. And where does filtration occur again? Only at the glomerulus. So define filtration for me. Well, I'm just trying to make my notes look good. Okay, so first process, filtration, is taking just the bad stuff or taking anything small enough, right, from the glomerulus to where? To the tubule, right, to Bowman's capsule. Okay, that's our first process we talked about, filtration. Okay, now we're not ready to do physiology yet, but I want you to be familiar with this when you come back to class next time. The second big process is reabsorption. Okay, reabsorption means going from the tubule and putting it back into the blood. So am I going to be reabsorbing good stuff or reabsorbing bad stuff? Good stuff. This is what we're doing with the good stuff. Everybody keeping up with me, right? So we took everything out of the blood. Now we got to keep the good stuff. So we reabsorb the good stuff from the tubes back into the blood. This tubule, and this is kind of a big summary of what we're going to cover next time. I know I'm saying a lot right now. This tubule is usually the proximal convoluted tubule. That's why we have those cuboidal cells, so we can absorb really well and put it back into the blood. What are the name of the blood vessels where we're going to be putting the good stuff back into? What's the name of this one right here that wraps all around? Peritubular capillaries. How can you remember that word? Because, gosh, you have so many words to remember. Peri means what? Around with the tubules. Okay? All right, good. That's reabsorption. The other process we're going to cover next time is secretion. Okay? Guess what secretion means? We're still talking about just stuff moving with blood and urine and filtrate and all that good stuff. If reabsorption is going from the tubes to the blood, secretion is going to be going from the blood to the tubule. What if something bad didn't leak out in the glomerulus? Still want to get it out of there, right? So let's say something bad got past the glomerulus and it's floating through these peritubular capillaries. Ooh, it's still a waste product, so we want it to be able to go from the blood back into the tubule. So this is only going to be the bad stuff that we're moving that direction. Okay? These two things are what we're going to spend the entire class period, our next class period together talking about, is how we do the reabsorption and secretion. I'm pointing it out to you now because number one thing I want you to know when you come to class next time is path of blood flow. Other than that, when I say reabsorption, you need to automatically be thinking that's good stuff. So that's putting it back in the blood to keep it. When I say secretion, you should think that's bad stuff. That means I'm taking it out of the blood, putting it in the tubes, because I want it to become urine and get it out of my body. Okay? All right? So that was our PCT. We said was cuboidal. What was the microvilli for? Increased surface area. Okay, good. Stuff we already talked about. Still previewing for next time. The loop of Henle is different on one side than the other. Descending is thin, freely permeable to water. Do we need water to go out of our body? Yep, that's where we're going to be able to adjust how much water we get out. Coming up, it becomes thicker. It becomes columnar. Can stuff move through columnar cells very easily? Very hard to do. Okay? Once we get to the distal convoluted tubule, cuboidal cells, but they are really thick cuboidal cells. No microvilli, not really worried about absorbing anymore. Okay, so we're changing the shape of our cells as we go through. Because at the very beginning of the nephron, we're still adjusting a lot. As we get towards the end of the nephron, it's almost urine. We're almost done fooling with it. Okay? Collecting duct, not much happens there, but we are going to see some hormonal effects when we get to the collecting ducts. And that's probably 2 class periods from now, but we're going to go through that. Okay? All right, now let's end today by looking at this last picture. And see if you can go through it like we just went through that other one that was simpler. Okay? So here's a blood vessel coming down. All right, so everybody just follow the cursor. Blood vessel comes down. Afferent arteriole goes into the what? Glomerulus. Right, and the glomerulus is sitting in Bowman's capsule. At that point, we pull all the stuff, we filter everything small enough out of the glomerulus, put it in Bowman's capsule. Now the filtrate goes through the proximal convoluted tubule. The little purple, that's the capillaries wrapped around it, right? So if it's something good, we can stick it back in the capillaries, right? The rest of the filtrate, the bad stuff, keeps going, all right? Hang on, I can't look up there and tell what's going on. Okay, sorry, this is proximal convoluted tubule. That looked like it was coming off. No, it is right here. Proximal convoluted tubule, here we go. Following it down. Then we have descending limb of the loop of Henle, ascending limb of the loop of Henle, distal convoluted tubule, keeps going. I don't know why they made it come behind to be confusing. Distal convoluted tubule comes to this big piece, which is the collecting duct. That keeps going and becomes the minor calyx, then major calyx, pelvis, ureter, bladder, urethra. Okay? Now, these 2 nephrons in this picture look different from each other, right? This one is called a cortical nephron because most of it's in the cortex. This one is called a juxtamedullary nephron. How do the 2 of them look different from each other? These have a really long loop of Henle. Okay, that's the only difference. You have this big loop of Henle dipping down in the medulla of the kidney a little more. But this one looks just like the other one. She's got a long loop of Henle. So here comes a afferent arteriole comes in to the glomerulus. Efferent arteriole comes out, becomes the vasa recta. Oh, wait, I used a different word, right? Doesn't do anything different. It's called a vasa recta if it's the capillary around this big long loop of Henle. Okay, it's still just a capillary, still just moving stuff back and forth. These are a type of paratubular capillary. Very good. Okay, just an example of a type of paratubular capillary, vasa recta. This just has a special name because it's on that big, long, special loop of Henle. Okay, let's follow our filtrate. We go through the proximal convoluted tubule, down the descending limb of the loop of Henle, up the ascending limb of the loop of Henle, through the distal convoluted tubule, into the collecting duct. Minor calyx, major calyx, pelvis, ureter, bladder, urethra. Okay? So, did everybody keep up with what we went through today? Yes, ma'am. These are just two examples to show you that of all the millions of these in your kidney, some of them are cortical, mostly in the cortex. Some of them are juxtamedullary because they have this big long loop of Henle that dips down. There is a reason for the two different kinds, and we're going to get there. The takeaway point for today, you got some anatomy to learn, right? So as I'm using these words, you know what I'm talking about. Okay. Second big thing, what we're going to do, we're going to take everything out of our blood, then we're going to take and we're going to reabsorb, put some of the good stuff back. If we put anything bad back by accident, or if we miss something bad, we're going to secrete the bad stuff back into the tubes, and it's all going to travel down and eventually become urine. I tell you what, let's do right quick. Before we go, I've said it 100 times, but let's write down the pathway of the filtrate urine flow. That's what we've been talking about, okay? So where does it start? Where do we start making urine at? Where does the filtrate start at? At the beginning of the nephron, and what's the first part called? Come on, guys. Bowman's capsule. From Bowman's capsule, it travels to what? Proximal convoluted tubule. Then to where? Good. Descending limb of the loop of Henle. Ascending limb of the loop of Henle. Distal convoluted tubule. Good. Collecting duct. Then next, minor calyx first. Then a major calyx. Good. Renal pelvis. Ureter. Bladder. Then urethra. It don't get much bigger than that. Is that good enough? So we got that? I'm not going to take it off. I'm just asking. Everybody, did everybody understand is what I'm asking. I know some of you are still writing. Everybody understand?